All right, so we will start the webinar in a minute or so, and right now I would love to announce the formal part of that. So the rules are very simple. So you can post your questions in our questions and answers section, and then all the panelists will see that, and then the moderator will pick up the question as soon as appropriate and reasonable. Also, we have a list of a few dozens of questions that were sent during registration on the form. So we'll use both lists. And of course, I encourage you to be as much as possible interactive and ask your questions. And I see that there is a greeting from someone. Good morning, everyone. So good morning to you who posted the question, and we're starting. So thank you so much for joining the webinar. We're here joined by our moderator, Philip Wolf, who is founder of Phocuswright and panel. And then I give word to Philip to introduce the panelists, and we will start. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. We're going to focus today on keeping the conversations alive, a topic that's very important because there's a lot of forecasting and procrastinating and prognosticating going on. And many people tell us that they want guidance and ideas and insight about what to do now. So I'm going to introduce our distinguished panelists. Actually, I'm going to have them do that themselves. So let's take a minute each, everyone. I'll start with you, John French. Why don't you tell the audience what you do in your day job before we dig in?
Thanks, Philip. Hi, everybody. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. So my name is John French. I recently started doing a little bit of work with DataArt as an advisor in their travel and hospitality division. I've been working in the travel industry for some 20 plus years, both B2C, OTAs, B2Bs, bid banks. I even set up a tour operator for an airline. And more recently, I've set up my own travel consultancy. So trying to share a little bit of my experience over the last few years in terms of helping other travel companies grow and non-travel companies get into travel. So that's me.
Great, thanks, John. Thorsten, what do you do for your day job?
Yes, thanks, Philip. So my name is Thorsten. I'm actually in the travel industry now for roughly also 20 years. I'm working mainly in travel technology, so very B2B oriented. I was working a long time for Sabre and then Amadeus. And 3 years ago, I actually left Amadeus and I started also my own company. I'm now a travel consultant. I mainly focus now since roughly 12, 13 years on ground transportation, I think you would call it. So this is mainly working with the railways and bus operators. And my main task right now is actually, besides working with DataArt, I think quite successfully on working on our customer base. My main focus right now is I'm working for a company called Skills. We are providing a reservation distribution system to railways. So it's quite an interesting situation right now with this whole COVID-19 ongoing and how they actually.
Do you miss working for the big GDSs?
No, actually, it was a very good experience and a good foundation for my professional career and experience. But to be honest, no, I enjoy every day since 3 years. It's a risk, of course, but to be honest, it's quite a success story, and I'm quite happy that I made that move. To be honest, yeah.
Congrats.
Thanks.
Marina, what are you doing these days?
So Marina Kolesnik, I have been in the travel industry just over 10 years. So I guess that makes me novice. Many years ago, I actually started travel practice in DataArt, but then DataArt was very lucky to bring in people like Greg and later Max to head it. In 2010, I started my online travel company in Russia, Travel Room. And in 2014, we experienced a major economic political turmoil. So in the last month, I have been having a deja vu. I haven't been there. And then 3 years ago, I joined Hopper, an very innovative Canadian travel startup that made a name for itself and acquired 50 million app users, being mobile-only, data-driven travel company. Extremely successful, and that was a very different and unique experience. I had at Hopper Hotels business and worked closely with all sorts of hotel supply partners. And my team comprised of both product operations and business development and salespeople.
Just realized you might be the only person. I'm an advisor at DataArt. I was on the board of Travel Rule and Hopper, so I got to work with you 3 times in 3 different capacities. So thanks
That's right.
for joining us. Greg.
Marina, you're anything but a novice in travel. Let me tell you, your 10 years have given you lots of perspective. First of all,
I was going to say 10 years and 50 years of experience.
Yeah, there you go. Philip, thank you for moderating this, and thank you to my esteemed panelists for coming on and engaging in this conversation today. We really appreciate you, and hopefully this will be useful to those of you who've joined in. So thank you all. I'm Greg Abbott. I lead the travel and hospitality vertical for DataArt, one of 5 verticals within the company. And we, in case you don't know DataArt, we help companies design, build, and then service and maintain software applications that serve their businesses. And again, we're focused on travel companies. And my day job is around business development and, of course, taking care of our key accounts and our clients.
Thank you, Greg. And we definitely save the best for last, Max.
Thank you so much. I was thinking, how can I complement this beautiful panel? I can just say that I'm a little bit different because I graduated as a software engineer and programmer, and I would love to complement this talented travel professionals with. I'm the #1 novice here, so I joined the travel industry in 2008 with my first customer Sabre, then Amadeus, and I met some of the panelists while working with these companies. In my day job, I work with our partners and on the customer side in DataArt, and this is kind of my honor to be joined by all of these professionals in travel, and then hope that I will complement with my knowledge of the software engineering and industry this beautiful conversation moving forward.
You're joining us from Bulgaria today, is that correct?
Yes, it's I think it's mixed experience. So behind me you can see it's Genoa. It's evening. It's pretty much this time in Genoa. This is the where I'm supposed to be according to my plans. It's changed a little bit. So I'm in my house here in Sofia in Bulgaria.
Great. Let's dive in. So everybody knows right now that sales activity, prospecting, travel transactions are virtually at zero globally. It's really like a one-of-a-kind phenomenon.
It's almost illegal to travel.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. So zero or near zero, right? So what I want to get from everyone on this panel is, what can you share with the audience that you're seeing, hearing, personally experiencing, that's a good way now to engage with customers and prospects and have a meaningful conversation?
Sure. May I start from the last? So I would love to kind of underpin that the people we're talking to these days, actually the amount of conversations is actually increased these days, and amount of information is increased these days compared to my normal day-to-day activities before February or January. But the number of decisions that I'm seeing around, it's actually less by the order of magnitude And
Are these with your customers or your prospects?
It's all across the board. It's partners, it's our customers, prospects, and majority of those decisions.
What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
I'm talking about the sense of what in terms of the relationships that I'm seeing, and these conversations are, you know, increased in by order of magnitude in terms of the intensity, but the decisions that are being made these days, they are decreased by the order of magnitude, and the number of positive decisions, like move forward with some contracts, with some partnerships, is actually just, you know, fraction of those. So this is
the biggest decision I'm facing is scheduling the next call sometimes.
Yes. So
anybody else?
days,
okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I think what is important right now, I think what I see is, I'm in France right now, so we are fully locked in now for a month and another month to go. So there's definitely no way to see people. So everybody is more or less working from home. And it's just important that to stay in touch, right? That's the first thing. You don't have that social contact anymore in the companies with your colleagues. So it's important that you stay in touch with partners or even friends or people that work in the industry. I think the problematic that we are facing right now is unique. There's no solution. There's nothing comparable. So I think we are all in the same boat. So it's important to keep that dialogue open. Now, from a business perspective, every customer or partner that I work with managed a bit in a different way, right? Some are extremely worried about cost and struggling through this. Others are a bit more, let's say, risk takers and already thinking about the what if we bounce back situation. So the decision, or let's say the discussions, is quite different and varies. And I have quite some interesting ones. So I'm more an optimistic person. So I'm also looking now at the bounce back, but I'm also realistic. But especially in the transportation sector, people are getting ready now with government starting to like easing up the lockdown to look into how to actually manage this bounce back, because everybody knows we'll not go from 0 to 100. It's
right.
That's
thing. Like what Germany recently announced
exactly.
Starting Monday. Yeah.
Exactly, but also France, they announced on 11th of May. So everybody knows that you most likely have to do and keep social distancing until vaccination is there, right? So now I start to have very interesting discussion is to say, okay, what does that actually mean? There's no guidance or plan. So everybody is a bit on his own. So it's important to have these discussions and do soundboarding, but also advise and say, okay, what is this actually from now, from this date onwards? Are we going back to 100 and 100% normal from day one? No. So what is that progressive move, and how can we contribute?
I mean, one of the things on a personal level for me, I mean, I recently setting up my consultancy business, and you know, having worked with some pretty big companies in the past, like Hotel Beds and Orbitz, who have deeper pockets. Certainly, I don't have that, and like in many companies now, access to cash is pretty tough. So you know, when I've needed additional services, when I wanted to get some research or access to events as and when they start up again, that I used to have access to, I think I've really valued you know, the appreciation that times have changed. I mean, a lot of companies have stopped their marketing quite naturally. It doesn't make sense to carry on doing the same things as we did before this crisis. And I think, you know, you appreciate an approach where people recognize that for many people at all parts of the value chain, from consumers to providers, times are tough. Everyone has a different context. Everyone is you know, has their own challenges, whether it's cash, demand, supply, whatever those might be. So definitely I've seen, you know, a value in people adapting their approach. So saying, okay, you're not ready to buy now, you're not ready to make a decision now, as Max has said. A lot of companies are not ready to make investment decisions. But if you can get an appreciation that at the time comes, you would be in my consideration set, then that's maybe as much as you can get these days. You know, and I think when companies go that extra mile, you appreciate that approach. You know, I mean, you could be talking about airlines or hotel chains that, you know, maybe didn't speak to you too much, and now are saying, hey, I value your status, I'll extend it another year. Great. You know, you probably respect the people that make the first move that maybe make more of a sacrifice rather than those that do it begrudgingly, which some seem to. But I think, you know, a recognition that things are not changing, and more of a sensitive and personal approach, I think, is familiar me works.
Marina, you spent most of your time on the consumer side of things, unlike most of us, the other panelists. How are you keeping conversations alive?
So there are different fronts of communications, right? There are communications with the customers, communications with employees, communications with partners, and communications with investors. And, you know, everybody wants to know what will happen, right? And even though everybody realizes that no one really knows, I think that's
and you're going to tell everybody what's going to happen? Is that,
I think that's one of the experiences that, you know, all of us as leaders have to face. People want to hear from us, and you know, we just have to be very honest. I also happen to be a very optimistic person, but giving practical and realistic reasons for optimism, I found is very, very important. Then obviously tone and nature of communications change dramatically, showing empathy, being very sensitive to each individual situation. We would be on a call with my business development team, and they'll be sharing who was laid off, their partner was fired, or all of their colleagues were, you know, sacked. It's been quite tough, but there's definitely a sense of camaraderie, the feeling that we're all in it together, however tough it might be, which I found very positive. You know,
on that, I find that companies that have had a culture of transparency, relatively speaking, are doing better now than companies that didn't have a culture of transparency, where they kept things.
Or they couldn't quickly enough facilitate transparency. Sometimes it happened so rapidly that some of the transparency, some of what to disclose day to day was really incredible. And they found out, they thought maybe they were transparent organizations, and then they found out, oh, wow, we're not. Oops. And we don't, and our business continuity plan doesn't quite have this written into it.
Talk about speed. I know you and I, Greg, have talked about what used to be a month is now a week is now a day, and a day is now an hour. It's just unprecedented. Who are you having conversations with? Is it customers? Is it prospects? Like, what different constituencies are you engaged with?
Well, so to start with the time, it feels like an era now that this crisis has gone on, right? And it seems like ages ago when the first conversations were happening, and it was rapid fire, and most of that was crisis management and business continuity planning, and really trying to adapt to a fast-moving news and a new environment. And it was like, so first it was, how do we cap costs? And then the second is, oh my gosh, how do we work from home? And some of those conversations from our perspective, I mean, our division's sort of natural reaction was to figure out we're a services company. How do we serve our customers? You know, whether we're going to be there tomorrow or not, how do we engage in the conversations with our customers to figure out how to help them? So whether it was how to handle some of the security consultancy on transitioning to a work from home environment, whether it was offering, you know, free ways to stand up e-commerce shops with Magento and Shopify, whether it was to figure out how to deal with AR terms. A lot of the early conversations that we were having were with our customers, and they still are with our customers. In terms of the pipeline, which we started out with a great pipeline at the beginning of 2020.
What's a pipeline?
So, as you know well, things were looking fantastic. A lot of those conversations have been discovery, like what does, and it's really been about being willing to hear what new paradigms are for companies. So the original project that you thought you were going to do might look really differently. So flexibility and resilience in those conversations is just a key message.
Let's segue that into an audience question that was just posted. All of us traveled a lot for business, a lot. And there's a debate going on now whether business travel will bounce back more or less than leisure travel. And I come from the school, I think we call it a permanent debt. I just can't imagine business travel ever resuming to previous levels for a whole bunch of reasons. The two primary ones is millions and millions of people are successfully conducting business and conversations online, and some of those can continue. And also, travel's expensive, and it's one of the first things to get cut. But anybody have a opposing view or an additional view on business travel in terms of?
I agree. Let's put it this way also. I mean, I travel also a lot, and I think seeing someone and meeting face to face has a great value. But now forced in this experience, I mean, we did full sales presentation now on video. And actually people were much more focused and the exchange was pretty good, right? So at the end of the day, I have to honestly say I'm in travel, but to be honest, the experience now that I had in some cases are actually pretty good. So I think from that, concluding from that is that I could imagine that everybody is forced in that experience. So we had to do it. If the results are positive, I could imagine that people are actually going to be more easy now in having a video conference and saying, no, I have to see my customer, I have to travel. So I'm expecting something like that now.
And I just got 2 passports because one was always out getting another visa, and I needed the other one. So
exactly,
now it's ridiculous.
And we were always very busy organizing our travel, right? The hotel and this and that and so on and so forth. So now, I mean, again, we see that it works, right? At least in my position, how I work with my customers and also with partners like DataArt, it works, right? So I'm expecting.
Anybody else having a different?
Yeah, I was going to be. Go ahead, John. I was going to be contrarian. Go ahead, you first.
I think the one piece for me, Philip, I think a lot of it makes sense. I think clearly, depending on which part of the business you work in, there's a value in, you know, whether it's customer, whether it's team building. I think a lot of interaction, you know, is going to maybe take time for us to get together as people and, you know, shake somebody's hand, or you know, if there's someone you know really well, give them a hug. But I think there's still a value in that. The other piece that I'm not so sure is necessarily all online, although, you know, certainly tools like LinkedIn are great, is the networking aspect. I think there's a great value in having however many people in a room and being able to start those conversations over a beer or whatever that might be. And I've certainly, you know, had a lot of successful partnerships on that basis. I know there's a travel company there's an online conference I'm going to attend next week, and I'll see how that goes because there's an opportunity to kind of network online. But that's the piece that I'm not too sure about.
And then before Greg starts, I would love to just add on top of John's. I think just, you know, to be mindful of the speed of the decision being made. I think just personal touch will be absolutely critical, even in post-COVID world. So I think that's going to be kind of the argument on the positive side as well.
Max, there's an odd statistic. You and I have had 3 meetings scheduled this year. One in the UK, one in Germany, one in the US, and all 3 have canceled. So that might be a record for the same person. Greg, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to play the contrarian view a little bit. John, and I will say this sort of idea of getting together to have a beer, that's really been one of the interesting conversations, and I'll throw this out there for the audience. A virtual pint, it's been pretty frequent these days. I mean, it's not the best way to do it, but we've had with our customers, an amazing amount of people just show up and we just say, hey, either have some wine delivered or, you know, just indulge in a 12-pack with us, and not me alone, spread it out. But you know, just having a virtual pint together has been something that opens up the conversation.
I remember the first virtual wine tasting I witnessed like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I said, virtual wine tasting, and the person said, you don't taste the other people's wine anyway. What's the difference? I go, okay.
That's right. So, but to the initial question, I'll say this. Look, if you just think about sales for a minute, as soon as the number 2 competitor gets on a plane to go see somebody that you're bidding for, you're gonna have to get on a plane to go see or keep or guard or whatever it is. There's going to be some of that that's going to drive back. Now, timing, none of us really know how quickly things are going to come back, and that'll really be what is our industry's response to bringing in that feeling of safety and security around this issue.
I think that's interesting. I think there's going to be more scrutiny about the potential value of a business trip before it gets authorized.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
And for every one of those, I need to go visit a big customer because my competitor just visited. For every one of those trips, there's like 10 less important. So I think
we'll probably see that we need to travel 5 times less and achieve as much. It's good to meet a person once, but then you can you can achieve a lot remotely. At Hopper, we had a culture of virtual meetings because company is highly distributed. And yes, we found that once a year, twice a year, it's great to get together, to go out, to have a drink together. But then the rest of the time, it's worked perfectly well, being across the world from each other.
More clear. And again, I'm not saying it's not bouncing back or whatever, but I'm just saying that this experience will probably lead to a more, let's say, thinking about a trip first. I mean, I'm the first one that did 4 or 5 cities in a month. So I think now I could imagine that I balance it a bit more. Again, I'm just talking about my personal view. I still, of course, value that face-to-face meetings are critical and still something that will happen.
Here's something interesting I've found when I read an opinion piece about forecasting some kind of green shoot or bounce back. I make sure I understand who the author is really carefully, because if they work for a TMC, for example, they're going to be much more bullish on business travel coming than others. But I love this line. I've used it several times recently by Peter Drucker. Amazing how that guy still gets quoted. He said, the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence. It is to act on it with yesterday's logic. I was wondering what your immediate reaction to hearing that is.
Well, I think that's right. It's uncertain what the future holds for travel industry. Frankly, no one knows, right? We can draw some parallels with 9/11 and see what happened with airlines and airports. We can look at some, slowdowns in 2008, 2009, or what Russia has gone through, last few years. But this is different. It's impacts every single aspect. Yes. Right? It's funding, it's budget, it's personal safety, it's risk of being stuck, it's not being able to go through the waters.
What about the moment? Sorry, Marina. What about the moment there's a vaccine? Sorry, I mean, working with cruise lines and watching the resilience after the trouble that they had with norovirus and the issue with Costa Cruises, and they had such pain. Now, maybe if you couple that with a crippled economy, but it seems to me travel is quite resilient. So again, I'll just play the devil's advocate there a little bit to say that we have a short memory and we long to go to destinations and we long to travel. And so to some extent, the moment that there's a vaccination that comes to play, I don't know, maybe.
And I agree with you, but I think the moment of when the vaccination is actually there, I think the time from now unlocking the world until the vaccination, I think that is a bit of the phase that is unknown. And then of course that can be a year, that can be 6 months, nobody knows, right? So what
I think you saw
Sorry, go
ahead. I was just going to say, I think you all saw Emirates Airlines started yesterday or 2 days ago blood testing at Dubai Airport.
Yeah. I can't imagine trying to get my kids on the plane then. My kids are going to be like...
And you know what?
No, but...
You better have had that blood test at home before you go to the airport, I would think.
Yeah, that's clear. No, but
so imagine they check your passport and in the parallel, they take your blood sample. That's really quite an adventure.
We're giggling now. Something tells me it'll become the new norm.
I think if you look at the parallels after 9/11, how the flying experience changed, you can imagine then people not really being accepting the fact you had to get stuff out of your luggage and show your stuff to kind of the security guards, and now it's taken this long to get the fantastic terminals that you have.
One of my favorite,
Schiphol, right, where you don't have to take anything out. Now that's great. Everything else has got used to emptying your luggage, to checking everything, and I'm sure we will get used to traveling differently in the future. I guess a lot of this is going to depend on, I'm sure there's plenty of questions in the Q&A about when will the recovery happen, how long is it going to take, what's the letter, is it a U, a V, a W, whatever. in terms of the shape of the recovery. And we just, there's so many variables we don't really know, right?
One of my favorite photographs you talk about after 9/11 is I'm a little boy in the 60s boarding a plane. It's the steps down to the tarmac with my parents, and friends of my parents are at the bottom of the steps, like waving goodbye to us. That they can actually walk to the bottom.
Yeah.
But I'd like to actually a little bit derail this your question, Philip. But what about this period before the vaccination is available to to masses? And let's think about what's going to happen, like with the opportunities and with the world and then travel before we get this vaccination or this stringent test before flight and stuff like that. So that's going to be many months.
Yeah,
Like 3, 6, 12. There are different models, so there might be some new things emerging, and that actually there are different conversations about the like using your cell phone with your camera and microphone to track if you've been reported infected, and that's and there's to complete tracking like in China. So there might be some different scenarios of how the industry, how travel, how the entire society will behave before this recovery happens.
yeah. Because there's also a question I see about social distancing, so I might want to just evolve a bit on that one, because I think, and that's what I see now with my discussion that I'm having, is you will not be able to fill a commuter train fully at max. We have to keep distance of a meter, 1.5. Some people even call it the 1.5 or 1.5 meter economy. Until the vaccination is coming. So the same for a plane, you will not be able to fill every seat on a plane maybe for a while. So there is room now, and there is a lot of
no more middle seats for a while.
Yes,
which is good on one side, but on the other, not good for the other. But there's room now for technology, because you have to manage that, right? You have to manage your capacity, your inventory differently. So how do you ensure that a capacity of 100 seats, you can only sell 50, right? How can you make sure that people are not sitting next to each other if they're not from the same family or from the same home, right? So there's opportunities coming until, and I agree with you, Greg, when the vaccination comes, you'll probably forget very fast, at least I hope so. But the thing is, until the vaccination is there, we will have this situation where we just have to adapt, and technology, obviously.
exactly.
Okay. Let's shift gears here. One lighthearted question somebody asked before we dig into the next one is, would you say you're working more hours, the same hours, or less hours than before you were locked at home?
I already answered this question, so
Triple.
I work more.
triple call volume has been triple what it was prior to.
Yeah,
I agree.
Different hours.
My only difference is it seems for some reason to skew more to the morning, and the afternoon is quieter. I don't even meet at time zones. But anyway.
I certainly think etiquette-wise, Philip, I mean, I used to join lots of virtual meetings before, and half people perhaps wouldn't be showing their face. I think now you at least, even if you have whatever you have in your background, you're showing your face on a call, which is definitely different.
That's true.
For me,
right,
picking hours is actually easier.
Since DataArt is focused on engineering solutions and helping clients, somebody's asking a question about digital transformation, and somebody else asked, what did I mean by a week is a day is an hour, and things like that. So what I meant by that is news is coming so fast that in management meetings, management decision making needs to be made much faster cycle. Somebody asked me a question the other day, and I said, here's my answer, but I think you should revisit that every day. And they looked at me. I said, yeah, I meant it every single day. So one of the big things now I talked about in a recent webinar is that a lot of people use either the truth or the excuse that we don't have enough bandwidth to do this and that. I come from the school, I think it's used too much as an excuse, but sometimes it's true. And I encourage everyone to create their no bandwidth lists and make sure you get them all done. For businesses, a lot of that has to do with digital transformation. So are any of you seeing any kind of activity or pulse out there where companies are actually taking the time now and accelerating some massive technical digital projects that they didn't have time before?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you see airline. You look at the airline world. I think a lot of airlines, as we know, have challenges with outdated technology.
What the question is, are you seeing them seizing the moment now and doing something now about it?
Yeah, I mean, NDC could be an example, right? I think a lot of airlines are perhaps, yeah, we're going to do it. Maybe we're going to do it. Now is the time to be kind of investing and hedging your bets, whatever your bet is, hedging your bets on that. And I think we've seen a few examples of airlines looking at that. Hotels for sure. I mean, I've a couple of webinars with hotel organizations, and they're talking about, even if people do come back to hotels, the sanitization process, they're kind of using your phone for check-in type thing that some of the chains are doing. I think those things will naturally have to change going forward.
But I would ask, are they talking about it or are they actually doing it?
Exactly.
Because
both.
the largest hotel chain, they furloughed 80% of their headquarters, right? That's the largest hotel chain. They left enough IT staff to keep their website up and running. They put a hold on everything. I'm sure, those leaders that are staying in, they have to talk about something, but are they really doing it? I highly doubt.
Well, I guess the ones that are focused on surviving know that they need to pivot or adapt or do something different, and technology is the enabler for that, right? So, granted, maybe.
Greg, are you seeing anything with clients?
Yeah, I was just
prospects?
gonna. Yeah, so it's been it's been forced embrace of digital transformation for the clients that were dragging their feet plural feet on initiatives like nobody would have recognized how challenging it is to process cancellations at that volume, and it couldn't be done, and particularly when all of a sudden your call center staff are work from home and the problems just weren't tractable in the normal operational ways. And digital, being able to interface with your customers via chat or use automation tools to be able to speed up just normal operational processes. There's so often the excuse has been, I can't change the engine while the airline's in flight. Well, it's not in flight anymore. And those companies,
that's what I'm asking, yeah.
Those companies that actually have the moxie and the ability in terms of cash to be able to invest in moving ancient infrastructure to cloud and cloud native is the time to do it. And so is there a massive amount of flux? No, it's a small percentage, but those that are using this time will come out much stronger on the other side of this. So those are some of the conversations we're having with our clients, is how to position them in a place where when this thing rebounds, they're in a strong position to seize the market available.
And some of that is kind of like even back office functions, right? If you look at hotels, a lot of the challenges, at least in the leisure industry, right, is people booking the cheapest rate, which happens to be the non-refundable rate. Now, all of a sudden, many people saying, well, we said it was non-refundable, actually, we can't deal with this, so it's everything is refundable. And the same with airline. I mean, how many, some of the kind of, well, you've got legacy carriers, how many of there have God knows how many different fare classes with things written in small print that tells you how much money you'll get back if you cancel the ticket within this time frame. And I think a lot of that can be simplified. It isn't kind of open heart surgery for companies to change the way that they set up and make it, to your point, Greg, more flexible for the customer and less harmful on their own operation, right? So to battering their own call centers who are working at home. Companies can do a lot more that isn't open heart surgery for some of these things. It doesn't have to be.
What about big initiatives that have been out there for a long time, but for some reason never got turbocharged? Like NDC's been going on forever. Autonomous car driving. There's a whole list of these that theoretically should get a boost now because of such a massive change in the environment. But do you think these kinds of things will get a turbocharge now, or you don't have those expectations?
I'm betting on drones. I think there'll be a bump on them, but I don't know
Last mile
about some
delivery.
last mile delivery. Yeah, it's good.
What about autonomously driven robot cars?
It's coming. Well, Tesla is ahead of it. As soon as they're done with ventilators, I think they'll keep pushing in that direction.
Good point.
And
Thorsten, you mentioned NDC. Is this going to be a catalyst for NDC, or will it just plod along at the same snail's pace?
I think if airlines don't have an awful lot else to do at this time, unfortunately for them, for me it's only a bet, right? You look at a lot of airlines that are or have publicly stated they want to be retailers, they want to they want to be the Amazon of travel, they want to divest themselves of some of the what they term shackling technology, some of which is 40 plus years old to date. That's an opportunity to do that, right? And there are companies that are betting on that. Whether they do all in, some airlines don't need to do it. A lot of low cost carriers.
I disagree. I think they're going to have so much to do getting things going again. I think it's going to delay NDC even further.
Yeah, I agree, because also that's the moment where airlines, I think, struggle the most. I think also in terms of how every country opens the borders or not. I mean, again, the railway is more or less government owned. So French government decides when French Railways drives, and that's in every country like this. But Air France or Lufthansa or United Airlines cannot fly to a country if the borders are open. I think that's the uncertainty is very difficult. And I think that's where the GDSs are actually playing a good role again, because at the end, GDSs are a very value for these airlines, at least to count on that when they need reservations and it goes back up, that they actually stick with that. I think for that sector, I'm a bit pessimistic that will actually now drive a lot of change, right? However, in other sectors, for example, like I said, rail travel, I mean, there is an obvious problem, and the legacy system that these operators are using is the same what you said, John, about being able just simply to refund and changing the rules. If it's not configurable, what does it mean? A lot of manpower to actually do it manually. They are actually right now, they have stability through the governments, right? They're more or less public, and from that perspective, and there's a bit of a drive there, because again, the government also demands them to manage the capacity in trains. So they are really now looking into how can we actually change it. That's digitalization and getting off systems that are old for decades and haven't evolved. So I think depends on where you look. It depends also on the financial stability, I guess. Where you might see some trends here going into digitalization a bit more aggressive, right? But
let me ask all of you audience question. Are there any technologies other than the obvious video conferencing services and collaboration tools that you envision will be in high demand during the next year or so?
Call centers for sure, for instance, and then next technology for solving problems as much as possible. Then chatbots and artificial UI. We're seeing that. I had an experience with one of the largest OTAs. I happened to book my flights to New York, and then Mr. Trump announced closed borders 2 days after I arrived to New York a couple of weeks ago, actually 1 month ago, and I wanted to get to somebody who can solve my problems to cancel, rebook, or change to the to another date, and I just wasn't able to get through the call centers. 3 days calling, no really a chance to get through. And second, I found some chatbot that used to solve some of the problems, but it was not working properly. So I think that's an area for improvement and opportunity for even large OTAs.
Any other ones?
I would vote for contactless technologies, especially in the hotel world, where you don't have to see a receptionist to get your key, to check in, to check out. You can get a robot to provide the room service for you.
This is it. I was going to say the same in code, like, basically facial recognition technology, like low touch is going to be, and then Max, just to echo yours, it's, RPA, process automation, obviously bots to solve low level problems is going to proliferate to be able to provide resilience and scale.
Another one with that is, how many signs do you see now? No cash accepted, right? Yeah. That's not going to be temporary. Right? A lot of people.
I also
So-
think that, go ahead, Maria.
I wanted to say in many parts of the world, paying with your cell phone has been a thing, right? China, India. US happens to lag behind.
So far behind. Yeah, so far
but
behind.
that's an opportunity.
Yes, and
Yeah.
also in one of the sectors like hospitality and part of like lifestyle hospitality, there might be some room for digitalization as well, like, you know, scheduling exact time when you come and leave the fitness club or some premises, so that, you know, some venue cannot admit more than X amount of
Yeah,
people
like
at the
queue
same time.
management systems,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
Queue
And then
management.
and I've been talking a lot to people from Britain, from Germany, from other EU countries, and it's all manual these days.
So
Yeah.
one of our customers that's in the food delivery space in the UK, you will know, came to us with that very problem. They had to build a queuing system because they had so much volume for transactions that they had to have a queuing system like overnight. You know,
Yeah.
so this
And it's a sad indictment that, you know, now, you know, you'd have a kind of, I don't know, the Louvre in Paris who would want to be implementing queue management systems because they were so busy, now would be want to be implementing them because they need to keep a distance between, they need to limit the number of people in for different reasons, which is, you know.
I think that's a really interesting space to watch, is events in particular, like large groups, massive groups of people where there's, you know, and it's similar to rail and train where they're packed in proximity.
Those events, and I know a little bit about events, it's a great example is you really need to see who's giving you the opinion, because if you produce events for a living, you're saying things like, oh, don't worry, it always bounces back, it bounced back before, there's nothing like face-to-face meetings. But then every company I'm working with is shifting event marketing dollars to digital marketing dollars. And I don't think that's going to all go back. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think it's a fair analysis, at least in the short term, Philip. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and until the economy is kind of firing on all cylinders again, I think it's going to be severely depressed. And you know, if then virtual events work out fine, then I agree. Why would you change?
Yeah. I do think that the companies, like, let me go back, and there's a question here, is there's this cliche that with every crisis, there's lots of opportunities. And I was on with a company 2 days ago, and I said, so what are you doing about identifying and seizing those opportunities? Because you were not an innovator before. And they got very quiet with me. So it's one thing that there's lots of opportunities out there, but it begs the question, what types of people and companies will actually seize the moment and identify these opportunities and execute? And I think that's going to be a big issue for companies, because they won't be able to change their spot, so to speak. What do you think?
I think that many players will change. Some will simply not survive. Some will have to reinvent themselves. I believe that travel suppliers like big hotel chains, big airlines, they have a head start embedded because many users may want to work directly with them, bypassing the middleman, I would imagine. So some may be successful. I am afraid that OTAs will have to dramatically reinvent themselves, or some of them will no longer be necessary.
What do you think they'll have to do? Like, what big changes?
So even before this crisis, right? All the savvy travelers would say, "Hey, I never book my flights on Expedia anymore because, like, they have the shittiest deals. I always go directly to the airline." And we now have seen, right? If you were working directly with the airline, you were faster in the queue and getting your money back or getting whatever credit with them. So potentially, there's more around lead generation. Hopper has been immensely successful with various financial products, whether it's price freeze, whether it's price drop protection, whether it's canceled for any reason, right? So I would imagine that some of them may be gearing more in that direction. So I still book my flight on Delta, and my hotel is my Marriott, but I go to companies like Hopper for this things that help me get peace of mind.
Yeah, reduce your anxiety.
A lot of these companies, the OTAs, are marketplaces, right, where they kind of match demand with supply. So there's been a lot of discussion. I know you were hosting or you were participating in a webinar a week or two ago, Philip, with some Italian hoteliers, yeah, and there's been a lot of publicity around some actions.
It's like a revolt.
Yeah,
it's like a revolt there.
Booking.com saying, hey, okay, from a customer perspective, I was very happy when I canceled my booking hotel and I got a refund pretty much straight away. Equally, I would have been happy to say, hey, well, actually, I can do that trip next year if you want. I don't need the money back right now. I'll happily extend and change my dates if you can change your dates online. But they took a universal decision just to refund all the consumer directly, right, and have that conversation with their partners.
Yeah. So let's get the whole panel involved in this. So Booking did something, Airbnb, something similar. So the theme of this webinar is how do you keep your conversations alive? And in the Airbnb case, they had two conversations, one with the customers and one with the hosts, right?
Yep.
And some people said Airbnb was just boneheaded, not collaborating with the hosts that put them on the map in the first place, and unilaterally announcing a customer refund policy. But a lot of other people said Airbnb erred on the side with the customer, and usually when you have pro-customer behavior, things sort themselves out. So what's your point of view on that? It's a big industry issue. It's not just Airbnb. We all have customers that either can't pay bills or need refunds or not. So
I think that the whole ecosystem is clearly hurting in one way or another, Philip. But it's a time we're talking about conversations. It now is exactly the type of conversation you should be having, and you can imagine are happening. I mean, Booking will be talking to Google about and any kind of meta sites about their marketing spend and saying, hey, look, the commercials have changed. I would be willing to participate if the commercials are this, or the commercial model is this versus a CPC model where I pay for traffic. In the same way, you can guarantee they'll be saying to hoteliers, look, demand is not there. What can you do on the rate side? And hotels will be saying, or airlines will be saying, what can you do on the commission side or the booking fee side? What can we all help each other in some way in the ecosystem? What can airports charge less to airlines, et cetera, et cetera? There's so many.
John, the conversation couldn't happen. Like, part of the problem with that perspective on it is that it happened so fast. Like, it really was the velocity at which decisions were made. It was the decisions that were made were based on the current models and the current flexibility and the current understanding of what the volume of cancellation would be. And so, there wasn't a lot of analysis and a lot of time thinking about it. And so therefore there was no conversation to be had. It was like a few people got in a room and made a decision. And it's really linked to the last question for me. What do you think is going to change the OTAs? There has to be, and at least in the near term, a lot more flexibility built in to trying to make money on cancellation fees or change fees or this type of stuff. To be able to rebuild that, you're going to have to find in the value chain, the customer wants flexibility, and the value chain is going to have to drive that flexibility. And if the systems don't support it, then customers won't book there.
Sure, and also it depends on the supply, right? So if to this webinar, if the kind of hoteliers of Florence get together and collectively say, overcome the differences that they may have normally and say, actually, we don't want to participate in this particular type of distribution with an OTA, whether it's Booking or Expedia or whoever it is, then collectively they have a bit more in this kind of reset to zero world that we're living in. They have a bit more.
But think about that. Right? They'll participate in any marketplace that will bring them at least the customer.
Because they'll be willing customer to pay acquisition. That's the problem.
Yes.
They'll be willing to pay higher commissions than they previously had. At least
no one's going to turn anything down, right? Equally,
no one.
Anything down.
On this topic, but here's a crazy idea, because a lot of people are asking me, what do I think Google's going to do? Do I think Amazon's going to get into travel? And I won't go there because we only have 5 minutes left, but here's a crazy idea. Talk of maybe all the travel sectors we're trying to have conversations with. The cruise sector has to be the zeroest of the zero, right? I mean, it's just, any word you want to use, decimated, annihilation, apocalyptic, right? So I'll throw it out there. Do you think Booking.com might start selling cruises in the way they have hotels and offer that industry the most unbelievable boost to get back on track? It's one of my
I think
crazy
they'll be
ideas.
selling everything, to be honest.
I
Just-
think is
just
the
another thing.
question of scale. Is a question of scale. So I think a lot of companies they started selling one things, and then once they expanded, and they just thought about why don't we materialize this? Why don't we monetize this our customer base by selling co-product? So it's just a question of like at what scale Booking.com will become thinking like Google these days, and they will start selling something different.
I think a lot of small intermediaries will disappear. Some smaller travel agents who are focused on cruise ships, they will no longer be there. So it's either existing big OTAs can fill that void, or some cruise ships somehow will have to be
'Cause
more
cruise
digital
lines are-
savvy and sell directly.
And they've always said we value distribution. We don't like to sell direct a lot. I bet you that will change.
Some of it may change for
as
sure.
well. Well, keep your seatbelts fastened. I can't believe it, but an hour has passed.
Oh.
Something tells me this could go on, but this conversation does go on. But I'd like to thank John French, Thorsten Zimmermann, Marina Kolesnik, Greg Abbott, Max Zumnoff. Thank you all very, very much. And to the audience out there and to the travel industry at large, let's keep those conversations alive. Have a great day.
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, everyone.
everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Goodbye.